Marriage, the Reverend Wilfred Alero. Marriage is a sacrament just like baptism, ordination, Holy Eucharist, penitence, etc. Sacrament is an outward sign of the inner grace. Also known as holy matrimony, marriage is generally defined as a formal union and social and legal contract between two individuals that unites their lives legally, economically, and emotionally. In Malachi 2:14, marriage is described as a holy covenant before God. In the Jewish custom, God's people signed a written agreement at the time of the marriage to seal the covenant. The marriage ceremony, therefore, is meant to be a public demonstration of a couple's commitment to a covenant relationship. It's not the ceremony that's important, it's the couple's covenant commitment before God and men. It was ordained by God in the Garden of Eden. Genesis 1:26-27. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. In Genesis, God commands man and woman to leave father and mother and become husband and wife through uniting in one flesh act that seals their love and which can bring forth children. Apostle Paul and Christ taught that celibacy is a gift, also not meant for all. Both Paul and Christ taught that marriage is a good thing and meant for most people. Marriage is a calling, but also a sacrifice because it thrives well depending on how each spouse goes extra mile to care for each other. Some of the most common sacrifices a spouse has to offer for each other include turning blind and looking inward into each other, playing within the field and not looking outside. Before marriage, one is advised to open eyes wide to see the right person and close eyes after getting the right person to avoid looking outside even after marriage. Accepting you will never be right all the time. You will always have to look at the problem from your spouse's point of view. Get neutral ground and compromise for the sake of peace. This involves proper communication and understanding, proper listening and listening carefully without filters, sharing everything. This is in every area of life for the rest of the marriage life. Everything gets shared with two people, from room, meals, responsibilities, finances, time, holidays, relatives, joy of victory, and disappointments of defeat. If you are not ready to share, marriage is not for you because sharing is caring and caring is a sacrifice. Sharing in financial decisions is the toughest area, especially when one spouse is a saver and the other is a spender. This can be the most emotionally bruising part in marriage. Dealing with someone else's messes. Sometimes the weight of that mess falls equally on both people. And sometimes there is one person who tidies up more than the other. When you are the tidier one, the other person's mess can feel like a burden, and it can really be tough. This is about understanding and helping each other out. It's about understanding the weakness of the other person and dwelling more on their strength, however minimal it may be, as you build them up. The truth is, marriage is full of sacrifices. Marriage takes work, and most of the time, a lifetime work. Sacrifice in most cases is as long as a lifetime of marriage. It is hard to carry a burden and keep sacrificing every day. Sacrificing and carrying the burden of each other for a lifetime may need a special character. Only people with a special degree of love, sacrifice, humility, and kindness can stay in marriage up to the end. While it might not always be easy, it's certainly a small price to pay to be with the person you love the most. No one understands marriage as an altar of sacrifice and sharing than Apostle Paul. He has a mind full of thoughts, considerations, reservations, and cautions, and that's what he's calling everybody's attention to before this engagement. He is expressing it all in 1 Corinthians, where he says, "The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife." Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Paul goes ahead to say, "I wish that all men were as I am, but each man has his own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried as I am. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To the married I give this command, not I, but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband. But if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and the husband must not divorce his wife. To the rest I say this, and it's I, not the Lord. If any brother has a wife who is not a believer, and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer, and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. Brothers, each man, as responsible to God, should remain in the situation God called him to. Now about virgins I have no command from the Lord, but I give judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. A woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. In my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is, and I think that I too have the Spirit of God. Paul has a complex thought about marriage. His mind can be clearly understood in the allegory of this animal in this cage. As he remains trapped inside, he gives a sound or a cry suggesting joy and excitement to his friend outside, which makes them think they should join the party inside the cage. His cry for help attracts others into the trap, and yet when they get inside that cage, they all want to come out together, but they can't. Paul is looking at marriage as something that has so many ways in and almost none out. This is typical of a trap, especially for those who are not called into this noble calling, into this sacrifice or this sacrament. This portrays marriage as a cage where the married wants to get out, but they can't. The vice versa may be true, where people inside the cage wants to come out, forgetting that marriage, if well thought before, treated as something that is ordained by God, and handled as a sacrament, can be the best gift in terms of home, solace, source of inspiration, joy, and comfort. If all these beautiful things we get in marriage were to be compared with what we get from other social institutions, then marriage would stand out as the best human institution. Amen.